The silent forest. The sun dipped below the horizon as Eva, Nathan, Liam, and Sophie arrived at the remote cabin, nestled at the edge of an ancient forest that was known for its eerie silence. The cabin stood alone, surrounded by towering trees whose branches barely rustled in the wind, an unsettling quiet settling over the family as they unpacked their belongings. The first night passed without incident, but Eva couldn't shake the feeling that something was watching them from the darkness beyond the trees, though she told herself it was just nerves. Nathan, ever the skeptic, dismissed Eva's unease as the product of exhaustion and unfamiliar surroundings, but even he found the silence of the forest unnerving. Liam, curious and adventurous, ventured closer to the forest's edge the next day, drawn by a strange sensation that something was whispering just out of earshot. Sophie, usually cheerful and talkative, grew quiet as she stared into the forest, her small face pale as she whispered, "They're sad, Mommy, the people in the trees." Eva froze at Sophie's words, but before she could question her, a gust of wind swept through the trees, carrying with it the faintest sound of distant wails. That night, as the family sat around the fireplace, the wind howled outside, but inside the cabin, they heard something else, soft, indistinct whispers echoing through the rooms. Nathan brushed it off as the wind playing tricks, but Liam knew better. He could feel the weight of unseen eyes on him, a cold shiver running down his spine. Sophie began speaking to invisible figures, her small hands gesturing as if comforting someone, her eyes distant, as though she was in another world. Eva, terrified but determined to protect her children, confronted Sophie, asking her who she was talking to, but the girl only replied, "They need our help, Mommy." As the days passed, the whispers grew louder, and shadows flitted among the trees, always just out of sight, their presence an ever-growing menace. Liam confided in Eva about the whispers he heard near the forest, and how they seemed to call his name, pleading for something he couldn't understand. Nathan, still skeptical but growing more uneasy, began researching the forest's history, discovering tales of people who had vanished without a trace over the centuries. The more Nathan read, the more he realized that the forest was not just ancient, but haunted by the spirits of those who had perished within its depths. One evening, as the family sat together, the cabin's lights flickered, and Sophie suddenly pointed towards the window, her voice eerily calm as she said, "They're here." Nathan approached the window, peering out into the dark forest, but saw nothing. Still, the feeling of being watched was undeniable, a prickling at the back of his neck. That night, Eva dreamed of the forest, of people wandering lost among the trees, their faces twisted in anguish, their cries for help echoing in her ears. She awoke with a start, drenched in sweat, and knew then that the spirits were trying to communicate with them, but she didn't know how to help them. The next morning, Sophie handed Eva a piece of paper she had drawn on, the image showing a circle of stones in the forest, surrounded by ghostly figures. Sophie explained that the spirits wanted them to find the circle of stones, to perform a ritual that would finally bring them peace, though she didn't know how she knew this. Nathan, though still doubtful, agreed that they should at least investigate, and the family set off into the forest, the air thick with a sense of foreboding. As they walked deeper into the woods, the trees seemed to close in around them, the silence pressing in, broken only by the occasional rustle of leaves underfoot. Liam led the way, feeling an inexplicable pull towards the heart of the forest, where he knew they would find the circle of stones Sophie had drawn. After what felt like hours, they stumbled upon the ancient stone circle, half buried in the undergrowth, its presence almost otherworldly in the gloomy forest. The air around the circle was heavy with the weight of unseen eyes, the whispers now clear and insistent, urging them to complete the ritual. Nathan found an old book among the fallen leaves, its pages yellowed and brittle, containing instructions for a ritual to appease the restless spirits of the forest. The family gathered within the stone circle, following the steps outlined in the book, each movement feeling charged with the energy of the spirits surrounding them. As they chanted the ancient words, the air grew colder, and the shadows around them seemed to draw closer, their presence almost tangible. Sophie stood in the center, her small voice rising above the others as she spoke to the spirits, telling them it was time to rest, that they could find peace now. The ground beneath them trembled, and a faint light began to emanate from the stones, spreading outwards until it enveloped the entire circle in a warm, golden glow. The whispers that had haunted them for days faded away, replaced by a profound silence, not the eerie stillness of before, but a peaceful quiet. The family stood together, watching as the shadows around them slowly dissolved into the light, their forms finally at rest, their anguish eased. Sophie smiled, looking up at Eva and Nathan, and said, "They're happy now, they're not hurting anymore," her voice filled with a quiet satisfaction. The forest, once dark and menacing, seemed to have changed, the oppressive weight of its history lifted, leaving behind only the ancient trees standing in solemn silence. The family returned to the cabin, exhausted but relieved, though the memory of what they had seen and done would stay with them forever. Nathan, despite his skepticism, couldn't deny what they had experienced, though he struggled to put it into words, knowing that no one else would believe them. Eva knew they had done something extraordinary, something that had brought peace to the spirits, but she also felt a lingering unease, as though something was still watching them. Sophie resumed her playful demeanor, but there was a new depth to her gaze, a wisdom beyond her years that had been gained through her connection with the spirits. Liam, though still haunted by the memories of the whispers, felt a sense of closure, knowing that they had helped to end the suffering of those trapped within the forest. The family packed their belongings, deciding that it was time to leave the cabin behind, the forest no longer the threat it once was, but still holding its ancient secrets. As they drove away, the forest receded into the distance, its tall trees casting long shadows, but the feeling of being watched never entirely left them. Eva glanced back one last time, and for a brief moment, she thought she saw a figure standing among the trees, watching them with a sad, silent gaze. Nathan reached over and squeezed her hand, sensing her unease, and told her that they had done all they could, that the spirits were at peace now. Sophie slept peacefully in the back seat, her dreams untroubled for the first time since they arrived at the cabin, her connection to the spirits finally severed. Liam stared out the window, lost in thought, wondering if the spirits would ever truly leave them, or if a part of them would always be tied to the forest. The sun began to set as they reached the highway, casting the forest in a golden light, making it look almost peaceful, though they knew better. The family's bond had grown stronger through their ordeal, but they also knew that the forest had changed them, leaving an indelible mark on their souls. As they drove on, the silence in the car was different from the silence of the forest, filled not with menace, but with the weight of all they had experienced. They knew they would never forget the silent forest, the whispers, the shadows, or the spirits that had once haunted its ancient trees, now finally at rest. Though they had performed the ritual and brought peace to the forest, they could never truly escape the memories, the feeling of being watched lingering in their minds. Nathan looked at his family, knowing that they had survived something unimaginable, and that they would carry the knowledge of the forest's secrets with them forever. Eva, too, knew that they had done what needed to be done, but as she looked at her children, she worried about the long-term effects of what they had witnessed. The forest, once a place of horror, was now a distant memory, but the shadows of its past lingered in their hearts, a reminder of what they had faced together. Sophie, still sleeping, stirred slightly, her lips forming a small smile as though she was dreaming of something pleasant, perhaps of the spirits finally finding peace. Liam's thoughts drifted back to the circle of stones, wondering if the ritual would hold, if the spirits would truly remain at rest, or if they would one day return. The family drove on, the cabin and the silent forest fading into the distance, but the memory of their time there stayed with them, etched into their minds. As night fell, they left the forest behind, but it was as though a part of it had come with them, a silent presence that would never truly leave their lives. The silent forest was far behind them now, but its whispers, its shadows, and the spirits they had encountered would forever be a part of their story.